Alright, so I've seen a lot of you guys asking for a color grading tutorial for the Mini 5 Pro, and I'm also under the impression that most of you guys want a easy to follow, beginner friendly tutorial on top of that. So that is my full focus today. I'm gonna make sure that all the steps are very easy and simple to follow along with. I'm also gonna make sure that you know how to save everything that we do today, so you don't have to redo everything the next time you open up DaVinci Resolve. Alright, we good? Let's dive in. Now, in order to get started, you need to head over to a site called blackmagicdesign.com, and you'll find both the studio and the free version available for download. Now, once you've downloaded DaVinci Resolve from Blackmagic Design, go ahead and open it up. And once you're inside, you can right-click and select New Project. And after naming your project, the first step is to set up a project manager. This is something that you will only do once, so no worries. So just head down to the cogwheel at the bottom right, and under Master Settings, we're gonna set our resolutions to 4K, because I'm assuming that you shot in 4K with your Mini 5 Pro. Next, we're gonna head over to Color Management, and here we'll set the timeline color space to something called DaVinci Wide Gamut Intermediate, and then the output color space to Rec 709 Gamma 2.4. However, if you are on a Mac, you need to set this to Rec 709A instead, but I am on Windows, so I will stick with Gamma 2.4. Now, once that is done, go up to the 3 dots in the top right corner, and we're gonna save our preset. So name it, hit OK, and then save. So now for the next time you open up DaVinci Resolve, just go back to the cogwheel and up to the 3 dots and load your preset. And just like that, all your settings are applied automatically. Alright, next we're gonna head down to the timeline icon and drag our clips into it. Now once you've done that, just hit Don't Change. And then move over to the color tab. Inside here, we'll set up our nodes. Alright, so this is also something that we're only going to do once, so keep calm. So in order to add a node, you need to hit Shift S or Option S if you are on a Mac. Then come up to the right and search for something called Color Space Transform. Apply this both to the last and the first node. Then go ahead and select the first node. So for the input color space, we're gonna set this to DJI D Gamut. And for the input gamma, this is normally where you would have selected D-Log M, but DaVinci Resolve doesn't have D-Log M by default, so we're gonna set this to Gamma 2.4 instead. Now for the output color space, we're gonna set this to DaVinci Wide Gamut, and output gamma to DaVinci Intermediate. Then go ahead and click the last node. For input color space here, we're gonna set this to DaVinci Wide Gamut, and input gamma to DaVinci Intermediate, output color space to Rec 709, and output gamma to Gamma 2.4. And again here, if you are on a Mac, you need to set this to Rec 709A. But as I said, I'm on Windows, so I'm gonna stick with Gamma 2.4. Now we have brought our footage into something called Rec 709. And at the top here, there's a button that you can press to bypass the nodes, so you can see the difference from before and after. Now next up, we're gonna add 3 additional nodes by pressing Shift S or Option S if you're on a Mac. Now it's important that these 3 nodes are in between the first and the last node, so just go ahead and also arrange them as you see fit. Next, we're gonna name our nodes to keep things a little more organized. So for the first node, we'll label this white balance, the second one contrast, and the last one color for our color adjustments. Now once this is done, we're gonna save this so you don't have to redo this again the next time, because this will be the starting point for all your clips. So go ahead and right click the image and grab a still. Then right click the still and choose export. Also make sure that you save this as a DRX file. Alright, so after this, it's super easy. So I'm just gonna delete everything we've done and then simply drag the still from our saved folder back into DaVinci Resolve. And then just dropping the file into the node tree to restore our grade. Alright, so let's talk about exposure. Now the waveform down to the right is the thing that shows the exposure, and ideally you want it to sit somewhere between 896 and 128. If the waveform is significantly above or below this range, it means the exposure was off when you took the shot. Now, if you need more guidance on exposure, I highly advise you to check out my settings video in order to get the correct exposure and the right settings. Now I know DaVinci Resolve can seem very overwhelming at first with terms like lift, gamma, gain and offset. So let's rename this instead. Let's call this shadows, this midtones, this is highlights, and this is everything. So if your exposure is a bit off, we can use the offset wheel to correct that. So dragging the master wheel to the right increases brightness and the waveform goes up. And pulling it down decreases the brightness and the waveform goes down. So let me show you what happens if I bring the waveform all the way down to 0. This is called crushing the shadows. This means that we're losing the detail in the dark areas. And the same if we pull the waveform all the way above 1023, we are clipping the highlights and this will result in pure white. If you ever need to reset any adjustments, you can just click the reset arrow to revert the wheel to its original state. Alright, so let's start working on our footage. First, select the first node, which is our white balance. Then head down to the temperature control on the left. When we drag this to the right, we increase the temperature and warm up the image, and pulling it down to the left cools it down. Now for this shot specifically, I'll go for a slightly warmer look. Next, let's move on to our contrast node. So we're gonna increase the contrast by dragging the contrast control up. Now typically for D-Log M, I like to put this around 300. Now if you want to see the before and after, you can toggle the node on and off by clicking the number in the bottom left of the node. And here you will notice that after adding contrast, there's a huge difference to our footage already. Alright, so let's work on the highlights. I like pulling the highlights down because it brings out more detail in the sky, but some people actually do like to increase the highlight for a more dreamy look. Now also be mindful not to pull the highlights down too far, as that can cause the image to break apart and create harsh edges. Alright, next we're gonna adjust the shadows. Now you can either lift them or lower them. I personally prefer decreasing the shadows for a more cinematic, dramatic effect, but this is also all about personal taste, and again you can toggle the node to see the difference. Alright, so let's move on to color. So come down to something called color boost, and we're going to increase this to enhance the vibrancy of the image. And again here, you need to be very careful because it's very easy to overdo this. So try and aim for a balanced look. Now for this specific shot, I think around 15 is more than enough. Now at this point, I also like to revisit the white balance at this stage because adjusting it can also add a cooler tone to the shadows. Now lastly, you can also add some detail. Now you can either create a new node for this or just use the contrast node to bring out more detail in the sky. Increasing detail will make the image sharper, while lowering it will give it a softer look. Alright, so now I'm going to show you how you can copy this grade over to your other clip so you don't have to do this every time. So first, let's drag in another clip to the timeline. Then we're going to select our ungraded clip and middle mouse click on the graded clip. This action will transfer the grade over to the new clip. Now of course every clip is different, so for this clip specifically this has a lot of autumn colors, so you might want to tweak the colors to fit your taste. And often, and most times, the grade won't be a perfect match, so in those cases you can always start from scratch using the still and have your node tree already set up. Now of course color grading goes much deeper than this, but using the method I've taught you today will take your footage way beyond shooting straight out of camera. Now if you're interested in more advanced techniques, I do have another video where I dive into masking specific areas and tweaking individual colors without affecting the rest of the image. And I also go over the differences between using a LUT and the manual grading method. Now if you found this tutorial too basic, please drop a comment below letting me know. Or if you found this video helpful, I would highly appreciate if you could smash that like and subscribe button as well before you head off. Thanks so much for watching, fly safe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.